Can I help you? Let me hear your dog. I got your pill belt. Okay. Nothing else though.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in today to our Zoom of No Warming, No Waste, No Wars. I'm Danielle Allura, your elite Miss Pennsylvania Earth. Again, thank you so much for tuning in with us today. We're going to be covering a motley of topics, all surrounding the phenomenon of waste. Food waste, dollars to wars waste, economic waste, how predictive technology can be one of those solutions, and how you can get involved. We're building a movement for a major change in society. Food waste is a major problem, exacerbated right now by the pandemic, with farms not having the expected or projected purchases from restaurants, consumers. They've chosen to turn perfectly good crops back over into their soil to decompose. And that's a problem, because acres of food decomposing into our atmosphere actually puts 28 more times stronger tons of greenhouse gases, more than CO2, in case you didn't know. But we still have food insecurity in many populations in our country. Quite the discrepancy. And guess what? Mother Nature gives us food, not the grocery stores. Just like it grows in farms, it could grow on our windowsills too. 1/3 of our landfills is filled with our food waste. 1/3. It's easy to be disconnected from your food source. You don't see where your Caesar salad comes from or where your French fries are growing. Not even your water source. But we're meant to be in harmony with the earth. Yet as self-interested beings, we crave more. We feel that we need more. And when everything is already given to us by an efficient planet, we're crippling her. Seems overwhelming, right? Well, it may seem overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. Let me tell you, food waste is a global problem that can be solved locally. We're all home, mostly cooking homemade meals. The first step of living sustainably could be simply growing an herb in your windowsill. Herbs enhance our meals and they're not too high maintenance. You can simply just put it in a mason jar and leave it on your window. Grow an herb in a glass jar. Start small. It's easy to start small. The fresh herbs that you buy, like I said, windowsill. When you're making a salad, you can save the end of your lettuce and hydroponically grow it by putting a toothpick through the bottom of it, suspend it over a mason jar or a plastic bottle, and put that on your window as well. Zero waste home. That's the smallest step that we can do right now as we're social distancing. If you're not sure how to regrow your food from scraps, you can go to my Facebook page, and I have a few very short videos on there that can show you how to do these things very simply. Starting small and going from there. A few weeks of watering your plants and getting used to the task of over a cup of coffee in the morning. Then soon you're going to realize that they're going to need soil. And that can stay in your window as well, especially right now because overnight the temperature is still below 45 degrees. An indoor garden is very simple. We have sunlight. So like I said, indoor garden. Second step, composting. The other end of your food scraps shouldn't be in your waste bin. They should be composted. You can start with a 5-gallon bucket, and then from there, as that fills up, that can go to a larger receptacle that will stand next to your trash can. And now you're rocking. The mixture from the compost that you make can then enhance your outdoor garden and enhance the composting soil that you can put in your indoor plants and clean the air naturally, much like the ones that I'm surrounded by today. The third step is recapturing your gray water. Water that you're warming up your shower with that's just going down the drain. It's perfectly good water. You can water your plants with that gray water. Even stand in a bucket and capture the water that has unharmful soap with no additives and things like that. You can then water your plants with. It can actually work as a pesticide for sorts. Simple. Imagine 10 years from now what your lifestyle could look like if you take these small steps. They all add up to a very great sustainable lifestyle. And your passion for living this sort of life can be organic, just like your indoor garden that you may have already started in quarantine. Don't be too harsh when you look back on your past self when you weren't living sustainably. It can be done. Some international examples are like in 1991, when Germany promoted recycling for the first time. Look how widely recycling is accepted now. Granted, we have a little bit more ways to go in order to recycle certain other types of plastics or oil-tainted cardboard pizza boxes, but at least they're out of our landfills. Haiti has an entire economy surrounding plastic waste. People can daily collect plastic and turn them in for solar-powered cell phones or cash. But that goes to say that a plastic economy, there's that much plastic out there that people can go out and collect plastic on a daily basis and make a living. In Denmark, if you don't have a food scrapping bin receptacle, you will be fined. It can be done. Philly said that they are going to start a composting community center sometime this spring. I hope it still will happen. You know, the world is a little different right now, but we're making so much progress. Gardens can be done even in clustered city areas, high rises. You can grow out of haystacks. New York City has some areas that do that, Hong Kong. Like I said, 1/3 of our landfills are our food scraps. And this waste doesn't work to break down if it doesn't have the correct elements to break it down. It'll just sit there. Those nutrients are better back in our soil to give us better food, to grow better grass, to feed better free-range livestock, better for our environment, better for our waterways, and for our planet. We may be in the middle of a social, economic, and political crisis right now, but our Earth crisis isn't that far away if we don't solve our global issues with local solutions. Think global, act local. It can start with each of you today, with a simple regrown plant in your windowsill. Herbs, salad, vegetables. And that's really what I hope you take away from today when it comes to waste with food. Thank you for
What is the Coalition for Peace Action? We are, as the name implies, an organization that works above all for peace. We have a campaign we call Diplomacy Not War, which works on stopping or preventing wars with Korea or Iran and stopping wars in the Middle East. So I'm pleased to say we're part of the Global Ceasefire Now campaign, which you see on the first slide. And that is a campaign by the UN, which has people all over the world asking their leaders to cease fire and instead of fighting wars, fight the bug. Okay? So we hope you'll join that. You also see here the contact information for the Peace Coalition and for me, and we can go on to the next slide. So, meantime, how do we help Americans in urgent need? There are things you can do. You can help get emergency food boxes. There are drive-through pantries. There are food banks. The one I'm most acquainted with is Philabundance. That's www.philabundance.org. You can go to their website and volunteer. You can contribute. There are many people in urgent need in the Delaware Valley. It isn't just, in some places, it is everywhere because there are 20 million new people who are unemployed and need our help. Next, please. So, as Danielle said, you can do things for yourself as well and your neighbors. You can grow a fruit and vegetable garden. My daughter has an indoor garden, as Danielle has started. You can do hydroponics. You can do a garden in your backyard. And you can also patronize local farmers and local seed places. And one that I like, and I'm partial to it because, full disclosure, my daughter has worked with this man right here, Owen Taylor, who is the owner of True Love Seeds Farm, and also helps to run a farm at Bartram's Garden. Bartram's Garden, you may know, is the oldest public garden in the United States, founded by John Bartram back in the 1700s. And they produce heirloom seeds. In other words, they're bringing back seeds from past centuries that are non-GMO, non-hybridized. And if you want to get seeds of that kind, you can go to trueloveseeds.com or other local farmers. They have they work with 20 different farms in the Philadelphia and Pennsylvania area, and they're worth checking out. Next is folks in New Jersey. Some of these people in this line, which stretches several blocks, waited 11 hours just for a virus test in Paramus, New Jersey. A Harvard University study published last Friday says we need at least 750,000 tests a day. So far, the government has provided about a fifth of that. We really need to ramp up so we can open safely. But let's get to some international solutions. Here we have Beatrice Finn on the right, is the director of ICAN, the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear War. You can find them at ican.org. And we're proud to say that we and 500 other organizations partner with ICAN on the campaign to support the UN treaty to ban nuclear weapons. This is something really worth getting involved with. 122 countries have already signed. Of course, we need the US and Russia and China to step up as well. And so we need to put pressure on our own leaders. Next one, please. So what can we do immediately in terms of the urgent needs? One of the things that we've learned is that there's huge unemployment, but the need for people helping is greater and greater. So Senator Van Hollen of Maryland introduced, and has many co-sponsors now, the Unite Act, which would increase AmeriCorps volunteers by 5 times, again, by 500,000, and starting at a minimum wage of $20 an hour. So that's not bad for a student or someone who is paying off his student debts, and certainly a lot of people starting out or who have lost their jobs, unfortunately. So we can restore the Peace Corps. This is part of the Unite Act to help stop the virus globally. The act would add thousands of workers for FEMA, for virus testing, contact tracing, fighting fires, and so on. And finally, it can help local farmers recover their businesses. So this is a picture that I love because this is thousands of people in Philadelphia. And here's me. This is our vice president, regional vice president, Mark Tolo, Alessia Vega from who was the assistant director at the time. This is several years ago, but it was the first march for peace and climate. And it was the march for no wars, no warming as well.
Next up, we have Christian Morsink. Christian.
Thank you for Christian. Makes me a Dutch male, right? Let's start with the slides. Okay, so I had asked Danielle to make clear that we have actually also Mother Earth Day, as the United Nations calls it. It has been adopted in 2010, or ratified in 2010, and it was introduced in 2006 by Bolivia. As far as I'm concerned, Earth Day to me means action. It's not so much celebration as that it means reflection and commemoration and looking forward. I took it on me to do a little bit of history telling about this whole thing because I became a father on Earth Day in 1970. And many of our young people have only heard of Earth Day as a natural thing, and I have lived before it. Next slide. So one of the important things that I think people should realize is that at the end of the 60s, an Apollo picture shook up the world. Just before that, we had the Martin Luther King killings, we had the demonstrations about Vietnam, we had really bad situations around pollution, and Earth Day started as a teaching moment. And New York and many other cities in the United States had this big thing in April the 22nd, because that was the moment before students would go to exams and before and just after Easter. It was a period where you could organize things. The snow had stopped falling, etc. It's amazing how that resonated. It awoke, together with the pictures of the Apollo, it awoke everything in the world for a new awareness. Also, this particular teaching was extremely successful. In December of the same year, Richard Nixon was able to start the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, currently being kind of taken away from science, but the idea of EPA had been with us for almost 50 years as well. That's an important element to realize. The next slide will show you how the picture of the Apollo 10 has resonated through the world. And Secretary General Uton in 1971 referred to our whole Earth as a spaceship in the part of the total cosmos. And we have a warm and fragile animate life. Those were the first remarks made by the UN about the whole notion of Earth Day. At those days, they used the word equatorial Earth Day, putting it in March, but we shift later on to April. Very important. In Europe, what we did as demonstrations was also followed in Europe, where the thing took on an international component, because acid rain problems in Europe, like in Germany, were caused by factories in the United Kingdom. The chemical spills in Basel, Switzerland, had created fish, dying fish down the river in the Netherlands. So we had international collaboration around water pollution and air pollution. take on different types of energies than only creating an EPA. It became part of treaties and things like that. So what you see here is an Earth Day that developed into a really large movement between governments, NGOs, etc. All kind of new groups were formed. Next slide. So the UN created 3 big conferences. The first one in 1972 in Stockholm. 20 years later, we had the Earth Summit. It was the largest ever held summit of the United Nations in 1992. It created the first Earth Pledge, and I hope that Danielle will put on her Facebook page the Earth Pledge and make sure that we young people learn what that actually means. And on that, in 2012, Rio Plus 20 was formed. That particular event was then used to start a new discussion at the United Nations. And in 2015, that led to what we now currently all over the world use as the Sustainable Development Goals, including how that applies in our own country, in our own city. We have a sustainability tsar, so to speak, right here in the city of Philadelphia, based on working on these Sustainable Development Goals. So that particular thing, that moment of the 22nd of April 1970, had an enormous impact. So it was incredibly successful. We have a governmental involvement in almost all nations. It's not just demonstrations alone. We have political parties that are green, and we have old parties that have created green platforms. We have translated totally new ways of behavior around waste management. We have actually created a global industry, also with nasty sidelines, like dumping in the Sahara and stuff like that. But we do have a whole new way of thinking about waste and about our environment and about pollution. Scientific involvement has become incredibly important. We have, in 2015, more than 8,000 students got a degree in environmental sciences in the United States alone. These guys are definitely setting the tone in a totally different way. Departments of Agriculture have an enormous amount of them have a science department called environmental science. It's going all over. It's in architecture, it's in engineering, you cannot escape it. All started with this particular notion of Earth Day, and we need to do something. We have seen that corporate organizations have picked it up on it. May I go back to the slide? One slide back, please. And we have citizen involvement. However, we have underestimated a few other things. We have a population increase that is now reaching 7.5 billion, which is double what we had in 1970. But we have 4 times as many cars in the world than in 1970. We have almost 5 times as much tankers and transportation, trade activities going on than we did in 1970. So we have many more people, and we have people doing more consuming. We have overextended our capacity of nature to absorb it, and we need to start changing our ways. And next slide. So we have bigger problems. We have now about 76 million people living outside, involuntarily, outside the countries of origin, of whom about 27 can be classified as climate refugees. We have the problem of governments for political reasons or certain corporations for looking at the bottom line only to keep holding on to wealth making the old way by exploiting nature instead of doing circular thinking with regards to waste and being involved with nature. We have wildfires in California, but this is a picture of a slash and burn fire in the Amazon that went out of control. we have to start thinking differently. And then in terms of agriculture, we need to do away with the whole notion of monoculture and plantation style thinking. Even in reforestation, this is a picture of a 12-year-old forest of nothing but pine. It's not the right way to do reforestation. Thank you. Next slide. So my suggestion is that we need to do something because we all produce waste. And as Danielle mentioned, when you take your shower, you can use that water. Actually, the University of Delaware is studying a thing called humanure. You can definitely consider everything that we call waste is usable. In nature, there is no waste. So, as we produce our waste, we need to start thinking about what we can do to create less waste and have a biodynamic going on with the environment as we can reuse that waste. So I suggest that we all start thinking about joining environmental awareness groups. I myself am with the Weavers Way Cooperation, and I'm with several of the urban farms initiatives in the Philadelphia region. Urge your local companies to be working on green, trying to do away with plastic bags, get involved with these kind of things. And as Danielle said, start learning to separate your own household waste, but also ask your work environment, your school, to do what you to change the behavior. Ask your politicians to become involved. We need to make them aware that this 50th anniversary will be followed 50 years from now with the 100th anniversary. I will probably not be around, but you guys, the younger ones, my grandchildren, I want to be able to celebrate it. So, and then lastly, and I agree again with Danielle, and it said, to understand what it actually means and how you can get mentally with it, do something like planting, creating something out of your own waste. It's actually not that easy. It is rather enriching. It is complicated. I tried to sell apples, but my apples were not satisfied, so I had to give them away. It is complicated. It is way more complicated than you realize, but do think in these terms. When you plant, you keep your hope alive.
Very much, Christian.
Always remember, there is no excuse for single use. Thank you all so much for joining us on our discussion, No Warming, No Waste, No Wars. I hope you continue to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Elite Miss Pennsylvania or facebook.com/Elite Miss Pennsylvania, as well as at Danielle Allura.